So in this video, I have this workbook. We're actually going to go through the entire workbook for this one. And all we're going to talk about is locking cells, which is a little confusing sometimes when you're first learning Excel. So here's what I've got is this first Locking 101 spreadsheet. So let's just talk about how to play around with locking, and then let's take a look at one example where you might want to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little program here. So let's see, I'm going to enter a number. I'm just going to enter in 4. So what I'm going to do is I have this height data, and I want to add the number 4 to each one of these heights. So we want to be able to do this with formulas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set first this equal sign equal to my first height plus the number in the blue box. Now, it would be really crazy to just keep here and keep writing in that formula, right? And what if I had hundreds of data pieces, right? So realistically, this is a case where you might want to drag. Now remember, to drag, there's this little X down here and you're just going to pull it down. But the issue is, so now you can see right away there's an issue, right? So if I were to click on any one of these numbers, so I'll click on the formula bar here. So you can see that as I was dragging, I only wanted that blue box added, and as I move down my cell references, everything moves down with it. So what that means is I need to lock this blue box here. So I'm just going to delete all of these. And okay, so clicking back on this formula here, so I've got the blue box, I've got the red box. I want the red box locked. So what you can do is you can either enter in dollar signs and that will lock the cell, but I do not like actually using, I don't like using the dollar sign on the keyboard. I like a shortcut. So that shortcut, at least in Windows, is if you click on the cell that you want to lock, you can hit F4 and that will just automatically add those dollar signs. So you want to get used to doing that. Now the other cool thing about this though is if you keep hitting F4, so you can see right here that the number of dollar signs either here or here are changing. So if you see, so I click it, 2 dollar signs, I hit F4 again, $1 sign in front of the 2, I hit F4 again, $1 sign in front of the B, hit it again, now no dollar signs. So in this case, I want to lock both the row and the column, so I want all the dollar signs. And so now when I drag, so now I can see I've got this reference here plus up here. And so now this is properly locked, right? And if I go down to any other cell values, if I click like here, okay, it's still locked. So that's what I wanted. Okay, so you can lock the entirety of a cell, or you can just lock a column or a row. So I thought it might be also interesting just to see what happens now if we play around with that. And that's really what ends up happening with locking, by the way, is like when you first learn about it, it can be a little overwhelming to be like, which one should I lock? But then over time, you just get better at like understanding what it is that you want to lock. So try not to get too overwhelmed with it. Approach it from like, I need to just kind of experiment with this, and then over time, just the intuition will come. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take these heights and I'm going to add them to the green column here. But what I want to do is I want to lock the column. So I'm going to set up the first one. So I have this height plus this value over here. But we want to lock that green column. So the column is denoted by letters. So I need to just lock the letter H here. So I click on that letter H, I hit F4, that locks everything, so I don't want that. Lock it again, that's the number, that's not, so the number corresponds to a row, so I want it in front of the H, so I hit it one more time, now I've got it in front of the H. Okay, so this is locking the column, so let's see what happens. So in locking the column, as you can see, I locked the column, but since I'm dragging down, this row is still going to freely move around. So it's not really doing anything in this case. Next, so now I'm going to repeat this. I'm going to take the height, but this time when I add the green column, now I'm going to lock the row. So coming here to the H4, dollar sign, I've got a dollar sign now in front of the number. The rows respond to a number. So now I'm going to hit enter. Let's do this again. Drag. So now you can see I've got different values from this column. So let's see, what did it do in this case? So now in this case, since I locked that row, everywhere that I pull down for this reference, everything is just going to be locked up here, right? So that makes sense. So the question is then, what happens if I lock both the row and the column now? What's going to happen? So if I set this up, so I set this plus this, and then I go ahead and I lock everything, and I drag it down. Okay, so if I click on one of these, so now everything's just locked onto this reference. So I'm bringing this up also because sometimes locking both or just locking one row or one column will have the same effect. And so it's just something that you can kind of play around with and figure out what it is that you're trying to do. The easiest way to figure out if you're locking the right things is to click back on the formula bar after you've dragged your formula down, and then just see what happened. So like in this case, right, like my green reference is changing as I move down, versus with this other column, my green reference didn't change. And it's just a question of whether or not that's what you wanted to have happen. It just depends on what you're trying to do with the data, right? So it's just, that's why you always want to take a look at what did Excel do when you did that, and then if you need to change what you did, just redo the formula. So now what I want to do is I want to go over to the next tab. So I've got here where it says locking examples. So let's just go over to this next tab. And so now we're going to just do an example where you might want to use locking or not use locking. So it just kind of depends, right? Okay, so what we're going to do for this one is we're going to compute relative frequency and cumulative frequency, and we're just going to kind of think through, do I actually need to lock things? And this is exactly what you're going to be doing when you are working in Excel. It just depends, and you have to think about what makes sense. So to compute relative frequency, the first thing that you've got to know is you've got to know how many data points do you have. And so in this case, I have my range, and then I have how many students watch TV for that many hours per day. So the first thing I need to know is just how many students total were in this particular survey. So I've got 26 students. Okay, so I've got 26 students total. So next you have to know what is your formula. So this can be, you know, reference your notes, your book, whatever it is. What formula are you trying to copy in this case? So relative frequency is computed by taking whatever data point you have divided by the total. So what I want to do is I never want to hard code in references. This is really inefficient to sit here and do this over and over. That's going to take you forever. The whole point of using Excel is to make this super quick. So the thing that you want to make sure you're in the habit of is click on the numbers that you're referencing. I want to take 5 divided by 26. Hit enter. Okay, now relative frequency is usually either like a smaller decimal or a percentage. So what I'm going to do is, and I talked about how to do this in my Excel 101 series, so if you need a refresher on that, I say go to the Excel 101 series. But here, I'm going to click on percent. Now I've got this percent. I'd like to have this out to 1 decimal, so I'm also going to click here, so it's 19.2%. Okay, so this was the first calculation. What do I want the next calculation to be? I want the next calculation now to be this 3 over this 26. So again, it would be silly to sit here and type this in over and over. The reality is, for each one of these calculations, what are we dividing by? We're dividing by this number here. So this number needs to be locked. So I want to just write one formula and drag it. That's my goal. So in clicking on this, what I want to do is, since it's always going to be divided by 26, I'm just going to go ahead and lock that B14. Okay, so now I'm just going to drag down and check it out. Now I've got everything filled in, bada bing, bada boom. And if I click on this, I can see, yep, each one of these is being divided by 26, which is how relative frequency is supposed to work. Okay, so that's the first part of this. Now let's talk about the cumulative frequency. So cumulative frequency is found by taking, so the first entry of cumulative frequency, again, this is like one of those things where, how do I know this? I would reference either my book or my notes for what the definition is, or to look at an example. Cumulative frequency always starts with the same first entry, but then it's cumulative. And cumulative means that you're adding up whatever was previous. So in this case, my cumulative frequency will be whatever my previous step was plus whatever my current frequency is. So here's kind of that relationship. Now the question is, if I were to drag this down, is this wrong? So if I click on one of these, so I see now here, this is this and this is this. So the question is, should I have locked anything for this? In this context, no, I don't want to lock anything because cumulative frequency, so this one is just, It's the starting point. And then after that, it's always the same thing. It's whatever the previous step was plus the current step. So that means each time, now I'm taking the previous step plus the current step. So in this case, it doesn't make sense to lock. So you really just have to think through, like, what is it you're trying to do, and what makes sense in that context to make this work. Okay, so that's all I've got for this video. So I will catch you guys next time. Bye.